Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Cameron, and in today's YouTube video, I'm going to be helping you guys prepare for your technical interviews. So whether you have some interviews coming up for investment banking, private equity, VC, consulting, and everything in between, I think this video is really going to help you fully prepare for these interviews so that you can crush them and either get the offer or move on to the next round. A little bit more about me if you're not already subscribed. I just graduated from the University of Florida with a degree in finance. Later this summer, I will start working full-time for KPMG Consulting in New York City. But before I accepted that offer, I went through the process of applying for a lot of roles in investment banking. I did get several offers in banking before I decided to go the consulting route, which means I definitely had to go through my fair share of technical interviews, which I feel gives me the credibility to at least make this video. Although I totally am aware I am not a technical expert by any means, I definitely was always very nervous going into these interviews. So I think that's even more helpful because I can be a little bit more realistic and relatable for you guys who are preparing for these upcoming interviews. So I've prepared 6 total tips or pieces of advice for how you can fully prepare yourself for these interviews. So with that being said, let's get into the first tip. The first piece of advice to be prepared for these technical interviews is to pay attention in class. And by class, I mean the classes that you're taking at your school or university. I know for myself as a finance major, I definitely had to go through the typical introductory finance and accounting courses. And honestly, those classes are so helpful. The rest of this entire technical interview process will be so much easier for you if you already have a strong foundational understanding of these concepts. Surprisingly, a lot of the technical questions come from an accounting background, so it is really important that you understand kind of the basic ideas of accounting. Some of the classic questions like walk me through the 3 financial statements, or how does purchasing a $1 million machine affect the different financial statements? Answering questions like that is pretty much fully dependent on your understanding of accounting concepts. So that's things like depreciation, where things go on the balance sheet, how transactions affect free cash flow. Things like that are all aspects of accounting that you begin to learn in these introductory classes. In addition to just accounting, those introductory finance classes are also extremely useful in this process. I know at the University of Florida, business finance, as it's called, was really that first introduction to time value of money, pricing bonds, and other finance ratios. This is another huge aspect of technical interview questions. So paying attention in this class as well as the accounting classes really will make your life so much easier later on because you're not having to completely learn these new topics. It's mostly building off that foundational understanding. Also, those upper level finance classes will provide even more color for these concepts. So again, at UF, we had to take a debt and money markets class, which was all about bond pricing, and then also an equity and capital markets class, which clearly was about equity valuation, M&A, building DCFs, figuring out terminal value, and kind of all of that. So the basic idea of this first tip is to just pay attention in class. I know obviously if you are thinking of applying for one of these upper level, investment banking, equity research, private equity internships, you probably are already a stellar student. But if you aren't and you're still hoping to apply for some of these jobs, it is so important that you pay attention in class and that you have that understanding, just because it'll make the rest of the advice that I'll give you later in this video just that much easier because you have that foundational knowledge. So the second piece of advice that I could give you that really helped me during my whole process is to check Glassdoor.com for the specific company and role that you applied for. It's obviously extremely helpful if you can look up the exact role you applied for on the website, and tons of reviews come up. A lot of the times there will be reviews by past candidates on the entire interview process. These reviews can kind of tell you the format of the interview, how technical or behavioral is it, how long is it, what were the interviewers like, things like this that are very helpful for you going into the interview just so you feel a little bit more prepared. Also in the past, I've seen exact interview questions written out on Glassdoor, which obviously is extremely helpful. But it's important to mention that if you see any interview questions on Glassdoor, definitely make sure that you can answer them. Don't just Google the answer after you see it on Glassdoor. Make sure that you would be able to answer that question on your own, and not just on your own, but confidently. There really is a pretty big difference between being able to just simply answer a question and to be able to answer it very confidently and thoroughly, because that shows that you really understand what you're talking about. But in addition to that, it's also important that you're able to ace both the technical and the behavioral aspect of the interview. So if Glassdoor kind of gives you some behavioral questions as well, definitely think those through. Think about the experiences on your own resume that could apply to that question, and just make sure that you have a good answer prepared, because honestly, the behavioral fit is way more important than the technical aspect. At the end of the day, the technical interview kind of shows that you're at least relatively qualified for the role, but the behavioral aspect of the interview is really what allows you to stand out. Anyone can walk through the financial statements and give the correct answer, but not everyone can be the right cultural fit for a company or pass the airport test. The airport test, if you haven't previously heard of it, pretty much is just the interviewer asking themselves if they wouldn't mind spending a little bit extra time with you at an airport, let's say if there was a delay or something like that. This pretty much is just saying, are you an interesting person? Are you boring? Like, that aspect of it. You want to come across as someone who's friendly and fun to be around, and basically that you wouldn't make the interviewer dread spending an extra few hours with you at the airport. The third thing is something I talk about all the time in my videos, and that is kind of utilizing your network. So hopefully at this point you've already networked quite a bit with analysts, associates, VPs, whatever. So you should already have a good amount of people at the company that you feel that you can reach out to about this interview. I know when I was going through the process, I definitely would reach out to the analyst to ask them about their own interview process, simply because the analyst had most likely recently gone through it in the last 1 to 2 years. So things were most fresh for them, and the process likely hadn't changed too much in that time frame. So I would simply ask them if they remembered their interviews, if they had any advice for me going into the process. And oftentimes they were extremely helpful. They remembered, oh yeah, it was very technical, questions like this, or surprisingly, it was very behavioral. Definitely make sure you know your resume. Things like that are extremely helpful just for getting your mind ready and prepared to go into that interview. So although this isn't necessarily exactly tied into the technical aspect, it'll just give you a better idea of what to expect in the interview, which will then allow you to use your time most effectively to prepare for that interview. So the next way to prepare for these technical interviews is to just do some research on the internet. Even when scripting this video, I just looked on Google investment banking interview questions, and a ton of resources came up. There are entire websites kind of devoted to the entire aspect of investment banking interviews. Sites like Wall Street Prep, Mergers and Inquisitions, as well as Wall Street Mojo. And also I saw even the Corporate Finance Institute had a lot of resources devoted to this as well. All these sites will give you a pretty thorough list of questions that you can expect to see on investment banking interviews. And I think it's pretty important to understand that each of these websites will give you kind of the same foundational questions that you could expect to see. During the actual interviews, the questions will either exactly resemble these questions, or will at least take these questions and kind of switch up one certain aspect of it. So if you're able to kind of understand how to solve each of the questions on these websites, then you're going to be fully prepared for whatever is thrown your way during the interview. Obviously, there can be some very hard curveball questions, but like I said, if you understand the underlying concepts of these questions, you at least will be able to attack the question and get it somewhat right. It's also really important that you answer these questions out loud and as if you were actually in an interview. It's a lot different to just think out the answer to the question and to actually deliver it verbally. I know for myself, whenever I'm even planning these videos or thinking how I would respond in certain situations, I'm always thinking about it in my head, but realistically, the way you communicate it is so much more important and different oftentimes than how it comes across in your mind. So definitely focus not just on understanding the concept behind the question, but also the actual delivery of you answering the question. And again, like I said, the internet is full of free resources. There's going to be a lot of programs that are going to try to get your money. I don't think that's necessary at all. Honestly, there is so much out there, not just on the internet, on Google, but also here on YouTube. People who have gone through the experience, they can definitely help you out. You don't need to pay for anything. So after you've done all of these things, the final thing that I did during this process is I pretty much just compiled a big Google Doc full of the different interview questions and important ratios and equations that I thought might come up in an interview. For each of the potential interview questions, I would always just write down a few quick words for the answer. Not a lot where it took up a lot of space, but just enough to kind of jog my memory to what the answer is, just so it's kind of fresh in my mind. Like I said, it's also important to include a lot of ratios and equations because that's oftentimes a very easy question that can be asked in interviews, whether it's just to ask you to define what the quick or current ratio is, or the equation for free cash flow. It's really important that those are on there and that you answer those correctly, because those are pretty much a layup. As I said a million other times in this video though, it is so important that you fully understand how to answer these questions. Technical interviews are not something you can really BS. You are not going to be able to fool the interviewer. Oftentimes, if they get just a whiff of you not knowing the true answer or way to solve the questions, they're going to just dig even deeper to kind of test you even more. I know this kind of happened for me actually in a super day with Goldman Sachs of all places. I got asked a really tough question, and in all honesty, I didn't feel very confident in my answer at all. But foolish me, I kind of decided to just wing it and go for it and see what happened from there. And of course, I was wrong, and the interviewer kind of just kept attacking the same question, tried to help me through it a little bit, but still by testing other aspects of the question, and it was just a very tough experience. And that was even me kind of knowing how to solve it, but just not knowing the fundamentals behind it. So if you don't know any of it, you are going to be in a bad place. So I really can't emphasize it enough, the importance of just having a central Google Doc to look at before your interviews. Like I said, this can include the interview questions and some quick answers, as well as current ratios, equations, formulas, as well as some current market trends or even news about the company that you're interviewing with. And finally, the last way to prepare for your technical interviews is something I alluded to in that last tip, and that is to make sure you are up to date on market trends and news. Oftentimes, this could be the easiest part of the interview. The interviewer could simply ask you to talk about what's currently going on in the market for 10 minutes or 5 minutes. I've even heard 30 minutes before. So if you know what's going on in the market, this can be a very easy question to answer. But if you are completely unaware, this again is something that you don't want to BS at all. I think the easiest way to make sure you're prepared for this aspect is to subscribe to The Morning Brew. The Morning Brew is my go-to daily business newsletter. I've been reading The Morning Brew every day for the last 3 years, and it has helped me so much, not just in preparing for my interviews, but also just in being a very informed citizen of the business world. They give you pretty much everything you need to know about what's going on in the market in a very easy to read format that I pretty much get done in about 5 minutes every day. If you yourself are interested in subscribing to The Morning Brew, it is completely free. The link will be down below in the description. So that is going to wrap up the video. Here are the 6 tips I have for preparing for your technical interview questions. As always, if you guys have any questions at all, you can reach out to me on Instagram right here at Galbraith. I'd love to help you out. And with all this being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.